I'm a big fan of the 80s. From the bright neon color palettes, relaxed synthwave vibes, and the overwhelming sense of nostalgia, I wanted to create an opener that captured the spirit of the 80s. First off, I gathered a bunch of reference photos using a program called PureRef. Creating a mood board is essential as it allows you to reference the style that you're after whilst working. I always start my scenes with a rough block out, and it's very important to have a rough idea of the camera framing as early as possible. This is essential for blocking out the composition. It also saves me time as I only need to model the elements that'll actually be seen in the final render. So the logo's set within a Vaporwave-themed pool. I find indoor pools incredibly relaxing, but only when there aren't screaming children or aquatic aerobics. I then worked on those details to the top right of the frame, messing around with the amount of clones and the roundness as well. Wanted something really playful. I then created a circular cutout on the right hand side wall. I knew I wanted some natural light coming through the scene. And then I created a handrail using a spline and a sweep object. Then I instanced that, beveled the corner just to make it nice and round. The scene was lacking dimension, so I beveled a corner of the pool to add some more depth into the scene. And then I worked on creating some detailing for the rear wall. Once I was happy with the basic scene elements, I then worked on some lighting. So just the skylight there and then some materials for the logo. I went for a glass look. And then I created some basic colors for the walls and the different objects. And after a bit of playing around with materials and lighting, I ended up with this result, which was a great foundation, but it was time to take it to that next level. I added in some soft LED lights, if you will, on those right hand side shapes, as well as a small sofa in the back corner. I then added in a bunch of plants for a nice calming effect. These are essential to the 80s vaporwave vibe. I wanted additional space within the scene, so I created a cutout in the back wall, and then inspired by Jared Pike's awesome dream pools, I created a descending staircase around a cylinder. For further foliage, I used Ivy Generator, which allows you to import geometry and grow vines procedurally, and once you add that back into the scene, you end up with a sweet looking vaporwave pool. The 80s saw Apple release the most iconic computer ever, the Macintosh 128K. My grandfather actually bought one of these for my dad's family at a price of about 10 grand, which is ridiculous. Today you'd be able to get two RTX 3090s for the same price, provided you can find stock. I'm modeling the Mac to the reference photos, which is super helpful for determining dimensions and the details as well. For example, this floppy disk cutout, which I'm lining up with the diagram there. The rest of the Mac was pretty straightforward, just a bunch of booleans as well as adding in some small geometric details. Next up was the mouse, which was again quite simple because of the boxy design. So obviously used a cube as a starting point for that. I then placed it into the scene and then got to work on the keyboard. This was quite fun. I started off by modeling a single keycap, which I then cloned into a grid array, lined up each of the rows with the reference image because obviously all the keys are shifted, minused some individual keys, and then got to work creating those special shaped ones such as the spacebar and enter key. I finished up the rest of the frame and then placed it into the scene. Obviously we need a mouse cable, so I used a dynamic spline with one end connected to the mouse and the other to the back of the computer. And this is fun as you can actually play around with it in real time. Next up was environment modeling. I wanted the Mac to be within a comfy workspace late at night. I started off by creating the desk itself, and then I moved on to creating the back wall. I knew I wanted to have the city lights shining through the window behind the computer. For the shutters, I used a spline, which I then extruded and cloned a bunch of times to fill in the window frame. I then extended out the desk shelf and placed a desk lamp. And then I got to work creating some extra props such as this retro telephone. Once it was complete, I placed it back into the main scene and then arranged it to fit the composition nicely. I then created an alarm clock just as an extra prop for the desk. Once I'd finished the modeling, I brought it back into the scene, and then I modeled the external hard drive for the Mac as well, because as an artist you need all the storage space you can get. I then created a camera animation linking the two shots together. Okay, so for the Mac screen, James' friend actually has a web-based emulator, and I was able to record this using my screen recorder, OBS Studio, and then composite this in After Effects with a dithered image of the pool. I then used this as an emissive texture for the screen itself, and then got to work with the lighting of the scene. And I'm using volumetrics to get those nice gold rays as well. Then I added some surface imperfections just to create some extra detailing for the materials, and once everything was done, I ended up with this. Now I needed to smoothly transition between the two shots, and I did this through the use of object buffers. So these are black and white images exported from my render, and I'm able to mask these with a shape layer in After Effects and animate the offset of the path. I can then use this as a luma matte to reveal on the second image while the first clip is still playing. As the camera passes through, I added in some additional effects such as chromatic displacement, lens flares and glows for that over-the-top 80s shine. I then introduced some more object buffers and masking just to wipe on some more colors before the transition hits. And with the compositing finally done, it was time to move on to sound design. They say audio is half the picture, which is why it's super important to have quality sound design in your projects. I recently started using audio.com. These guys have provided content for brands like Netflix and Adidas. They have over 450 artists and are adding new music daily. They also have a really great playlist feature. This is super helpful for organizing all of the various tracks for a specific project. Adding a song to a playlist is as easy as browsing through their many selection filters, choosing a track that you think fits the project well. You can even click the favorites button and hit the add to playlist. And as you can see, instantly it's right there in our playlist as well as our favorites. But guys, they have excellent sound effects as well, created by top sound designers that have worked for LucasArts as well as Netflix. Searching for a sound is super easy, and they also have tags to find relevant sound effects as well. You can currently get 70% off your first year of Audio Pro. This gives you unlimited music and sound effects, which can be used commercially. They also have lifetime memberships where you make a one-time payment and get access to their ever-expanding library for the rest of your life. And you guys can use my special coupon code DigitalDave10 to get 10% off any subscription. So using audio.com, this is what I came up with for the sound design. I started off by looking for some bass ambience. Then we needed a riser to transition into the second shot. And here's both combined. Then I added in some Foley for the computer. For the second shot, I started off with a water sound. Then to ease out of the transition, I used a whoosh. And that's the second part complete. And finally, I added a layer of music to bring everything together.